Well, after reviewing a movie about a band of misfits sent on an insane mission, it's time to review a TV show about a band of misfits going on insane missions. Oh, it was clear from their appearance in Season 7 of Clone Wars that there was more to the Bad Batch than we were led to believe, seeing as how they were a unique group that only showed up in one arc and had an older Clone Wars character join them, left room for new adventures. Which brings us to today, where the first season of the Bad Batch has concluded and it was pretty good! Which is what I would have said if most of the episodes weren't just a consistent meh. I started writing this review at around episode 10 when the show was doing pretty decent and I was happy with it, sorta. But the season finales come out and honestly looking back at it, I'm not exactly impressed. I'm more disappointed than anything else, leaving to only fully enjoy around half the episodes in the show. Even though the show is somewhat of a continuation of the Clone Wars, with it retaining much of the polished art style of the final season, it feels just like Rebels honestly with its tone a lot of the time and characters. However, I want to get the stuff I immensely enjoyed out of the way first, since there was still stuff I like here. The first episode of the series was fantastic, showing the events of Order 66 from the perspective of the Batch and starting of the transition from the Republic into the Galactic Empire. It was great seeing that. We haven't actually got to see that perspective a lot, if we're being honest, in a lot of Star Wars media, so it's nice seeing what that was like post Revenge of the Sith. Animation, as briefly mentioned, is absolutely beautiful, with everything looking rough and dirty as it did in the Clone Wars, with different locations as well being nicely detailed. Voice acting as well was great. D. Bradley Baker killing it as the Batch in literally every single clone trooper. And if he's able to give distinct personalities and voices to a bunch of clones of the same dude, this man is a legend. I also liked seeing Clone Wars characters and a couple Rebels characters when they cameoed. That's cool. The main characters were pretty alright and inconsistent. The rest of the season, it was... Okay, look. This is what leads into the things that brought the season down for me. It wasn't as good with these couple of little things, and it's what made it disappointing for me. But look, if you thought that this show was fantastic, good for you. I'm happy you saw something there that I may not have. This is just what I think, and sadly, it didn't do it for me. The story of the Bad Batch is about a group of experimental clones who have to deal with changes going around them as the Republic slowly transitions into the Empire. And the concept like that alone is fascinating, as we get somewhat of an inside perspective on what clones thought of the Empire coming to power, and although the show kind of follows The Mandalorian, oh, we have a kid tagging along now, so that kind of means we have to be on the run story. Which brings me to probably the most controversial part of the show, Omega, who has a lot of people either on the side of she's an irritating little shit, or she's the best character of the show, and I want to address the second example later. Omega doesn't mean for anything bad to happen to the Batch and cares for them like they're her brothers, since they are, which leads to some cute moments between them.
It's your own room. Well, what do you think? I thought this place could feel more like a home.
It's perfect. Thank you, Wrecker.
It was nothing.
Though it does get kinda irritating on multiple occasions when she runs off and almost gets herself killed or captured, because she gets distracted or is too dumb to think about certain things, like how you probably shouldn't be talking to strangers in a place you don't know with your brothers not being around and all. And even with that, I'd say that she's probably the best and most developed character of the show, since she actually goes through changes throughout the season. But that's less of because of the changes she goes through, and mostly because none of the other characters in the show go through any changes. The only other character to be slightly interesting is Crosshair, but that's right at the end with the twist of his inhibitor chip being removed and him hunting the Batch on his own terms. Sadly, the biggest casualty to me throughout the whole show would undoubtedly be Echo. The show didn't help explore how he was dealing with being part machine throughout it, like in the end of Season 7 when we found him almost dead. Like, him only having one arm should be a big deal, but the show doesn't do anything to help point that out. They actually dress him up as a droid at one point and use that to comedic effect in an episode. Also, in another episode, Common Ground, when the Batch needs to escort a former Separatist leader off-world, they show Echo doesn't like that they're helping a Separatist, and during the whole episode he just seems to be against the whole thing till the end when he's like, "Oh, don't worry, dude. I know I was saying how I hated doing this mission because you're a Separatist, and your side turned me into a mechanical nightmare, but we're cool now." But the worst part was when him and Rex briefly talked about Fives and what happened to him, Echo's closest brother, and how he died, and the show didn't even get into that. Oh, and all the other characters are fine. They pretty much have, like, one or two personalities that don't change throughout the season, but they were alright and didn't bug me. I mean, Hunter is basically just the stoic good guy that we've seen in a ton of shows. Wrecker's the comedic relief, who can be really nice sometimes, especially with him and Omega's interactions. And Tech was just kind of there in the background, just basically being the smart guy. And that was it. And with this being a post-Rebels era show, where most of the time it wasn't serious or trying to do stuff seriously, but in a somewhat idiotic fashion, this show sadly follows that to some degree, as well with the show not representing the clear and present dangers for the characters, and instead opts them to keep them somewhat relaxed and fine to some degree. Like, this is during a point where the dictatorship is rising, and your former brother with his personal hit squad is now hunting you, and the characters act as though everything is totally fine when it gets into goofy, fun antics. Like, I don't have an issue with that, but when you switch between episodes that have stuff like this...
Well, who collects the bounty?
Oh, look, it talks.
to stuff like this... you start to present somewhat of a tonal inconsistency and an actual threat of danger. Look, I'm saying if you have a scene of innocent people being burned alive, then you should kill the Horn people too. I know that Clone Wars also did this with its season sometimes, but even in its first season, the tone was consistent with it being a show that took place during a war. People were shown getting killed on screen violently. And as I said, with it being a show that took place during a war, it mostly showed episodes of warfare. With this show, a lot of the time not even showing the rise of the Empire as much as it should, since that's probably the most fascinating part of the show, which honestly makes it more disappointing that I'm more fascinated in the world building that the show is doing, rather than the characters and story themselves. So all in all, Disney Plus's Disney exclusive Disney Plus show, The Bad Batch, was fine. It hinted at some great concepts and ideas with some great world building, but with its somewhat confused tone, underdeveloped characters, and overall lack of sense of danger, makes the show somewhat of a disappointment. The first episode of this series promised more than what we actually got. Hopefully this will be like season 1 of the Clone Wars and evolve with both its characters and its stories into better things. And the show gets a 6 out of 10. It's slightly above average, and I'd rather watch it over WandaVision and Falcon Winter Soldier. No, I will not elaborate on that.